All right, stop. Just stop. You've seen it before, people arguing endlessly, throwing facts at each other, convinced that if they just say the right thing, the other person will finally change their mind. But they never do. And here's the truth, they never will. Nietzsche understood something most people don't. Winning isn't about proving you're right. It's about something much bigger. The people who spend their lives debating, trying to convince others, trying to win arguments are playing the wrong game entirely. It's not about truth. It's about ego. People don't argue to discover what's real. They argue to defend what they already believe, to protect their identity, to avoid the discomfort of being wrong. And the smarter someone is, the worse it gets, because now they have an arsenal of logic, rhetoric, and cherry-picked evidence to bulldoze over anyone who disagrees. But here's the catch, no one actually learns this way. No one walks away from a debate thinking, wow, I was completely wrong, and this stranger on the internet just changed my worldview. Instead, they dig in deeper, more convinced than ever that they were right all along. That's why the same debates happen over and over, the same political fights, the same philosophical arguments, the same moral dilemmas recycled endlessly, because people aren't searching for truth, they're searching for victory.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
And Nietzsche knew that this was a waste of time. He saw that the truly powerful people, the ones who shape the world, the ones who actually win in life, don't waste energy on debates. They don't need to. Because truth isn't something you argue for, it's something you become strong enough to handle. The ones who are obsessed with proving their point are revealing something about themselves. They need the debate, because deep down, they're insecure. If you were truly confident in what you knew, if you had built real strength, would you feel the urge to constantly argue with people who don't see things your way? Or would you just move forward? Nietzsche's rule for winners wasn't about outsmarting your opponent. It was about outgrowing the entire game. He believed that the strongest people, the ones he called the Übermensch, don't waste time trying to convince others. They focus on becoming so undeniable in their actions, in their ideas, in their power, that argument becomes irrelevant. Because here's the truth, the most revolutionary ideas, the deepest insights, the real paradigm shifts in history didn't come from debates. They came from people who did something. The minds that changed the world weren't the ones who spent their time arguing. They were the ones who built, who created, who proved their ideas through action rather than words. Look at the people who shaped history, not the ones who sat around debating, but the ones who moved forward regardless of opposition. The ones who didn't wait for permission, who didn't waste energy on convincing people who refused to see. The ones who understood that real influence isn't about arguing louder. It's about becoming something so real, so undeniable, that the world has no choice but to follow. So the next time you feel the urge to debate, stop. What are you actually trying to achieve? And if the answer is just to prove you're right, maybe the real power move is walking away. Because the people who win in life aren't the ones who argue best. They're the ones who don't need to argue at all. Now, what if I told you that the greatest minds in history avoided debates not because they were afraid of losing, but because they knew something most people don't? That's what we're about to get into next. And trust me, this will change the way you think forever. Think about the people who have actually changed the world. The great thinkers, the innovators, the revolutionaries, were they the ones sitting in endless debates, trying to convince everyone around them that they were right? Or were they too busy pushing forward, building something new, proving their ideas through action instead of words. Nietzsche understood that the people who truly shape history don't waste time arguing because they know something most people don't debate is a trap. It tricks you into thinking you're making progress when all you're doing is running in circles. The more you argue, the more you get pulled into a game where the goal isn't truth, it's dominance. And the moment you start playing that game, you've already lost, because now your energy is being drained into something that changes nothing. The internet is proof of this. Billions of debates happen every day, but what actually changes? People argue, they throw insults, they bring their best evidence, and in the end, everyone walks away believing exactly what they believed before. It's not about learning, it's about reinforcing identity. It's about defending the version of the world that makes people feel safe. That's why debating is addictive. It gives people the illusion of power. It makes them feel like they're doing something important when in reality, they're stuck in an endless loop of trying to prove themselves to people who will never listen. And that's exactly why the strongest people refuse to play. They know their time is better spent elsewhere. Nietzsche's Übermensch wasn't someone who won debates. It was someone who had outgrown the need for them. Instead of trying to dominate others with words, they focused on dominating themselves, on becoming stronger, sharper, more disciplined, more capable. Because here's the truth: the world doesn't change because of arguments. It changes because of action. The people who build movements, who create breakthroughs, who shift entire paradigms don't do it by debating. They do it by moving forward so powerfully that the world is forced to catch up. And this is where most people get it wrong. They think influence comes from convincing others. It doesn't. It comes from becoming something undeniable. When you look at the most influential figures in history, the ones who truly reshaped how people think, they didn't waste time trying to persuade everyone to see things their way. They lived in such a way that their ideas became impossible to ignore. They didn't argue. They demonstrated. They were the proof. And that's the real difference between those who change the world and those who waste their lives in debate. One is focused on external validation, on winning arguments, on proving they're right. The other is focused on internal mastery, on becoming so clear, so strong, so effective that they don't need to argue. Their results speak for them. And this is where Nietzsche's rule for winners becomes clear: stop debating, start building. Stop trying to convince, start becoming. Stop wasting energy on proving, and start living in a way that makes argument unnecessary. Because the highest level of power isn't winning debates. It's becoming someone who doesn't need to. Now, what if I told you that the way you think about truth itself might be completely wrong? That's what we're about to get into next. And once you see it, you'll never think the same way again. Most people think truth is something you argue for, something you defend like a fortress, something you have to protect from attack. But Nietzsche saw truth differently. He saw it as something that isn't given, but created. Not something you debate, but something you prove through the way you live. And this is where most people get stuck. They think truth is about having the right arguments, the right facts, the right logic to tear down anyone who disagrees. But debate has never been the path to real understanding. If it were, the smartest people in the world would spend their time debating, and yet the people who actually change things, the visionaries, the innovators, the ones who reshape history, aren't the ones arguing. They're the ones doing. Because truth isn't about winning debates. It's about becoming strong enough to face reality as it is, instead of how you want it to be. And that's difficult, because reality doesn't care about opinions. It doesn't care about arguments. It doesn't care about who wins a debate. It just is. And the people who waste their time fighting over ideas, trying to prove themselves, trying to convince the world they're right, are missing the point entirely. The more you argue, the more you reveal that you need others to agree with you to feel secure in what you believe. But real confidence doesn't come from being agreed with. It comes from knowing that even if no one else sees what you see, it doesn't matter, because truth isn't something you argue about. It's something you live. That's why Nietzsche's rule for winners is so powerful. He understood that the people who spend their lives debating are looking for something outside themselves: validation, approval, certainty, but the ones who actually win in life don't wait for permission. They don't waste time trying to get others on their side. They build, they create, they prove their ideas through action, not argument. And in the end, that's what separates those who make an impact from those who stay stuck. One is focused on proving. The other is focused on becoming. And here's the real test: when you hear something that challenges what you believe, do you immediately feel the urge to argue, to defend, to fight back? Or do you have the strength to sit with it, to let it challenge you, to see if there's something in it that could make you stronger? Because that's the real difference. The weak argue. The strong learn. The weak need to be right. The strong need to grow. And the ones who actually win in life aren't the ones who destroy their opponents in debate. They're the ones who build something so undeniable that argument becomes irrelevant. That's why the rule is simple: stop debating. Start proving. Stop defending. Start doing. Stop trying to convince and start living in a way that makes argument unnecessary. Because in the end, the ones who change the world aren't the ones who argue best. They're the ones who don't need to argue at all. Look at the people who spend their entire lives arguing. They're always in the same place, fighting the same battles, recycling the same points, convinced that if they just say the right thing, the world will finally see what they see. But it never happens. Meanwhile, the people who actually shape the world are too busy moving forward to argue with those who refuse to see. That's the real difference. One group is obsessed with convincing, the other is obsessed with creating. And this is where Nietzsche's rule becomes more than just a mindset shift. It's a blueprint for power. The weak fight for recognition. The strong don't need it. The weak need agreement to feel secure. The strong are secure whether people agree or not. That's why debates are a complete waste of time for anyone serious about winning in life. The moment you engage in a debate, you're admitting that you need the other person's agreement to validate what you believe. But you don't. The greatest minds in history didn't argue their way to influence. They spent their time mastering themselves, refining their vision, building something so undeniable that the world had no choice but to adapt. And this is where most people get it wrong. They think influence comes from overpowering others in debate. It doesn't. It comes from becoming someone so undeniable that argument becomes irrelevant. Look at the people who have truly changed things: scientists, artists, leaders, visionaries. They didn't waste their time trying to convince their critics. They kept moving forward, proving their ideas through action rather than words. Because words are cheap, arguments are endless, but results are undeniable. And that's why Nietzsche's rule isn't about avoiding debate because it's uncomfortable. It's about recognizing that debate is a distraction from the real work. The people who waste their time arguing are looking for external validation, trying to get the world to confirm that they're right. But the ones who actually make an impact don't wait for permission. They don't waste time trying to get others on their side. They build, they create, they prove their ideas through action, not argument. And in the end, that's what separates those who make an impact from those who stay stuck. One is focused on proving, the other is focused on becoming. And here's the real test when someone disagrees with you. Do you immediately feel the need to argue, to defend, to fight? Or do you have the strength to keep moving, to let your results speak louder than any debate ever could? Because that's the real difference. The weak argue, the strong build. The weak need to be agreed with, the strong don't care. And the ones who actually win in life aren't the ones who destroy their opponents in debate. They're the ones who build something so undeniable that argument becomes irrelevant. That's why the rule is simple: stop debating, start proving. Stop defending, start doing. Stop trying to convince, and start living in a way that makes argument unnecessary. Because in the end, the ones who change the world aren't the ones who argue best. They're the ones who don't need to argue at all. There's a reason why the loudest voices are rarely the most powerful. The people who spend their time arguing, debating, and proving themselves are always looking outward, always reacting, always needing someone else to validate what they believe. But the ones who actually move the world forward don't operate like that. They don't waste energy trying to change the minds of people who were never going to listen in the first place. They put all of their focus into becoming something that can't be ignored. That's the difference between those who make noise and those who make history. One fights for attention. The other becomes so undeniable that attention is forced on them. Look at every major shift in history: scientists who shattered entire fields, artists who redefined culture, leaders who changed the course of nations. They weren't sitting in endless debates, trying to convince people one by one. They proved their point through action, through results, through raw, undeniable presence. And that's why Nietzsche's rule isn't just about avoiding pointless arguments, it's about understanding where real power comes from. It's not in the debate, it's in the execution. It's in becoming the living proof of what you believe instead of wasting time trying to explain it to people who have already decided not to see it. The strongest people don't argue because they don't need to. Not because they're afraid of confrontation, not because they can't win, but because they understand that real influence doesn't come from words, it comes from what you do, what you build, what you embody. Words fade. Arguments get lost. But action? Action leaves a mark. That's why the ones who truly shape the world don't waste time convincing. They create something so real that the world is forced to catch up. And here's the brutal truth: if you feel the need to constantly argue, if you feel the urge to prove yourself every time someone disagrees, you're showing your own insecurity. Because if you were truly confident in what you knew, you wouldn't need approval. You wouldn't need agreement. You would just keep moving, keep building, keep proving without ever needing to say a word. That's the mindset shift that separates those who get stuck in endless debates from those who actually create something meaningful. One is focused on being right. The other is focused on being undeniable. And the moment you stop wasting time trying to win arguments and start focusing on proving your ideas through action, everything changes. Because in the end, the ones who make the biggest impact aren't the ones who argue best. They're the ones who don't need to argue at all. Look at the people who argue the most. Look at the ones who can't resist jumping into every debate, correcting every wrong opinion, proving their superiority in every conversation. What do they actually accomplish? What do they build? Nothing. Because all their energy is spent reacting instead of creating. Meanwhile, the ones who truly change things are doing the opposite. They aren't explaining. They aren't convincing. They're working, refining, moving forward, while everyone else is stuck in endless discussions that go nowhere. That's the difference. One is obsessed with being right. The other is obsessed with becoming something so real, so undeniable, that argument becomes pointless. And that's why the people who achieve the most, the ones who leave a mark, don't waste time debating. It's not because they can't argue. It's because they've outgrown the need to. They understand that truth isn't something you defend, it's something you prove. And proof doesn't come from winning debates. It comes from results. It comes from action. It comes from becoming the kind of person who doesn't need to argue because their life, their work, their impact says everything that needs to be said. The strongest people don't need to fight for recognition. They don't need to force people to see what they see. They just keep moving forward, and eventually the world catches up. And this is where most people fail. They think power comes from being louder, from being more aggressive, from crushing their opponents in debate. But real power doesn't work that way. Real power is silent. It's the kind of presence that doesn't need explanation. It's the kind of strength that doesn't need validation. And the people who have it don't waste time proving themselves to those who were never going to understand. They just keep doing the work, and in the end, that's what separates them from everyone else. Because the truth is, the ones who argue the most are usually the ones who have achieved the least. The ones who actually make an impact don't have time to argue. They're too busy building something that speaks for itself. Look at history. Look at the people who actually changed things. They weren't the ones sitting around debating every little detail, wasting energy trying to convince those who refused to see. They were too busy doing, too busy proving, too busy becoming so undeniable that eventually even their enemies had no choice but to acknowledge them. That's how real influence works. It's not about overpowering people in arguments. It's about becoming something so real, so effective, so unstoppable that words become unnecessary. And this is where most people fail. They think if they just argue better, if they just explain things perfectly, if they just find the right words, then suddenly everyone will understand, everyone will agree, everyone will change. But that never happens. Because people don't change through debate. They change when they're forced to confront something so undeniable that their old beliefs can't survive. And that never comes from words. It comes from action. It comes from results. It comes from becoming something that makes debate irrelevant. That's why the strongest people don't argue. They don't need to. They just keep moving, keep building, keep proving without ever stopping to fight for recognition. Because recognition isn't something you win in a debate. It's something you earn through undeniable proof. And the ones who understand this are the ones who actually change things, not the ones who fight to be right, not the ones who waste time proving themselves to people who will never listen, but the ones who keep working until reality itself bends in their direction.